Enermax AQUAFUSION 120mm ARGB all-in-one CPU liquid cooler. This will be the cooler. I'm doing some temperature testing to see how well this thing does keep that CPU cool. There will be timestamps in the description below. If there's a certain part of the video you'd like to jump to, you're more than welcome to do so. There's some other links down there that may interest you. And don't forget to do all that fun YouTube stuff on your way down that description box. Let's flip you over here and we'll run down through the components to make up today's test bed. Alright, to start out with, for the CPU, we have the AMD Ryzen 7 5800X. For the motherboard, we have the Gigabyte B550 ORS Pro. For storage, we have a Silicon Power 512GB NVMe M.2 SSD. For the RAM, we have G.Skillz Ripjaws 5 Series 16GB 28GB sticks running at 3600 MHz. The RAM is the only thing in the system overclocked. I did overclock the RAM to run 3600 MHz speed. Everything else is running in out-of-box settings. For graphical power, we have the Gigabyte Radeon RX 5600 XT. The power supply, for the power everything, we have the EVGA 650W GQ 650 80 plus gold semi-modular power supply. For the case, we have the Cooler Master Half XB Evo high airflow case. And I also included two deep cool 120mm ARGB fans in the front of the case. That way we have two intakes and one exhaust, which I think that's where a lot of people would be running a system. I hope they are, at least. For the coolers that we have today, we have the Enermax AQUAFUSION 120 ARGB. We are going to be putting that against the Be Quiet Pure Loop 240mm all-in-one. We do have numbers for the Ergo AT 240mm CPU cooler. And we do have numbers for the Cooler Master Air MA610P, which that is a tower style cooler. And I know what you're thinking. I thought the same thing when I actually tested the air cooler. It ain't fair to put it up against the 240mm. But you got to take into consideration the price. All these coolers are within $20 or $30 of each other. Maybe $40 would be the max difference in them. So they're all right around the same price point. So I think it is fair to be able to put them up against each other if you're trying to stay within the same price point, and which one's the best option for you to buy for your money. So I ran down through the components to make up the system. The way I do my testing and why I do my testing the way I do run Cinebench R23 for the half-hour stress test 3 times back to back. Out of them 3 runs, I average them out and see what the average temperature is, and I also see what the average max temperature is. I also have Heaven Benchmark in the background looping. That way our GPU is getting as hot as possible and adding as much heat as possible to the system. I think this is a pretty fair comparison. All of the tests for all of the CPU coolers was run the exact same way. I think it's a pretty good comparison to see which one's going to do the best for you. Ran down through the components to make up today's test bed. Also ran down how I do my technology and why I do it the way I do it. Now it's time for the results. So let's see how this thing fares against these other coolers that we put it against today. There's a fancy little chart I put together for you. We have the max temperatures in black. The average temperatures is in orange. We have the AQUAFUSION. The max temperature was 88.3. The average was 84.1. The Pure Loop 240mm max was 81.6. Average temperature was 77.4. The Ergo AT 240 max was 79.8. The average was 74.8. The Cooler Master MA610P air cooler, which is the tower style cooler, max was 68 and the average was 64. So by looking at these numbers, this thing didn't do very well, which we figured it wouldn't do very well against the 240mm. You know, it's double the size of the radiator. I didn't figure it would do very good against that. When I actually did the Cooler Master tower style cooler, it kind of surprised me that it was doing better than what the 240mm was doing. And of course the 120 ain't gonna do as good as the 240. Well, looking at the numbers that we got in today's testing, as long as you got the room in your case to buy the bigger tower style coolers, I don't see where a 120mm actually makes much sense. When I bought these coolers, I bought this one and the Cooler Master air cooler at the same time. They're both the same price. And yes, you can get 240mm for the same price. But I don't think this 120 is really worth the money. As long as you got the room and you got the case to support that bigger air cooler, I think you'd be better off by buying you an air cooler. These 120s would come in beneficial if it's a mini ITX build or something like that, to where you are very limited on the size of cooler you can buy and put in there. By looking at these numbers, if you're going to go with a 120, I think you'd be better suited to put it on a 6-core 12-thread processor instead of an 8-core 16-thread processor like I did in today's video. They're more suited for that application, and they're more suited for a more restrictive case. I can't speak for all the 120 millimeter AIOs out there. This is just for this particular one. Because the temperature was hitting so high on this one, I actually took the cooler back off, put more thermal paste in. I thought maybe I had something to do with it. Maybe I didn't have it mounted quite right or something. But even after doing that, I still ended up with these temperatures. So if you'd like to have more information about this all-in-one, there'll be a link in the description below. There's some other links down there that may interest you. Don't forget to do all that fun YouTube stuff on your way down that description box. You all have a good day, and I'll see you in the next video or live stream.